What's going on, family? Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series is continued with 100 years of World Championship fight. Tuesday, September 21st, 1926. Welterweight Mushy Callahan defeats Pinky Mitchell in 10 rounds in Vernon, California to become the brand new junior welterweight champion. Now, after he lost to Baby Joe Gans, he would go into somewhat of a depression stage, but it wouldn't take him long before he got back into Stillman's gym, and he wanted to start over again to regain his opportunity for championship status. 20-year-old Mushy Callahan stood 5 foot 7.5 inches, and he had a 70-inch reach. He had 30 wins, 6 losses, 2 draws, and 12 knockouts under his belt. Now, Pinky Mitchell was 27 years of age at the time of this fight. He stood 5 foot 11 inches, and he had 48 wins, 22 losses, 5 draws, and 10 knockouts under his belt. Now, who was Mushy Callahan? He was Vincent Morris Scott. He was born November 3rd, 1905 in Brooklyn, New York. He died June 16th, 1986. He was 80 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Hollywood, California. I had the pleasure of meeting Mushy Callahan more than 10 occasions. He was something else. He was a judge and a referee. He refereed hundreds of fights, judged hundreds of fights. He reminded me of Paul Cavalier. He was somewhat similar. But Mushy Callahan was a very good fighter. He was a champion. He would go over to Hollywood, and his job as a Hollywood director was to make sure he directed all the fight scenes in any movie that was presented in Hollywood. His job was to direct the fight scenes, make sure that the fighters threw the punches the right way, blocked the right way, ducked the right way, and that's what his job was. But he was something else, told me hundreds and hundreds of fight stories, and I had the pleasure of meeting Mushy Callahan. As for Pinky Mitchell, his name was Myron Pinky. He was born January 1st, 1899 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He died March 11th, 1976 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he stood 5 foot 11, and he was a welterweight. Very good fighter, and that was a good fight between these two men, Mushy Callahan and Pinky Mitchell, Tuesday, September 21st, 1922. Pinky Mitchell, by the way, was brothers with Richie Mitchell. In 1922, the junior welterweight championship title was presented, and he's the man that had the first championship belt, so salute to him. September 23rd, 1926, world heavyweight champion gets taken to school in Philadelphia in front of an exciting spectating audience of 120,557 screaming spectators. Now, the referee was Tommy Raleigh. The judge was Mike Bernstein. The other judge was Frank Brown. For the NBA World Heavyweight Championship bout, and that would be Jack Dempsey's last fight as a heavyweight champion. September 14th, 1923. Against Louis Angel Firpo, Jack Dempsey had a hell of a 2-round fight affair. He was actually knocked out of the ring. And both men went down a total of 9 times. One of the most exciting heavyweight championship fights in boxing history. Now, Harry Wills had a contract to face Jack Dempsey, and it was ignored. In 1924, both contracts were signed between both men. And Jack Dempsey decided to ignore that contract. He didn't respect it. He thought he was above it. So the state of New York, the commissioner had banned Jack Dempsey from coming to New York. Couldn't fight in New York anymore. Not at Madison Square Garden, not at Yankee Stadium, or any of the arenas. He couldn't referee there. He couldn't do anything in New York containing to boxing. And when he came back in 1926, he had a young man from Greenwich Village, which was downtown in Manhattan. His name was Gene Tunney. He was the America's light heavyweight champion. He had wars with Harry Greb, 5 fights combined. He would lose his title to Harry Greb. The only loss he ever had was to Harry Greb. And he was waiting for Jack Dempsey. And he stood, this record stood 67 years. February 20th, 1993, 132,274 sat in the seats of an audience to see Julio Cesar Chavez in Mexico City. And that goes to show you from 1926 to 1993 what it was like to be a face in boxing. So Gene Tunney and Jack Dempsey was the third $1 million gate. The first one was George Carpentier and Jack Dempsey. So Jack Dempsey was the face of boxing. And Dempsey earned $770,000. Gene Tunney earned $200,000. And Gene Tunney was intelligent enough to have a clause in his contract where the money would be reversed. He wanted $1 million, providing he became champion and they would have a rematch. But he had to first get past Jack Dempsey. He didn't see that being a problem. Gene Tunney was friends with George Bernard Shaw, and he read literature. He would wear cardigan sweaters. He was totally different than the average fighter. He was definitely different than Jack Dempsey, and you can see that in his approach in the boxing ring. And Arnold Rothstein had bet $125,000 4-to-1 odds that Tunney would defeat Jack Dempsey. He wound up becoming a multi-millionaire after that fight. Now we're taking a look at the second fight in 1927.
And as the left is in Dempsey's face, he lands a right. It's down from the front line of left and right to the face. Still going on and down. Dempsey is on the other side. 8-8. 9. And Tunney is up. And now they're at it again. Tunney is finding a way. Dempsey is following Tunney. Dempsey trying to get on left, but doesn't land. The second whistle is just thrown. Dave Barry is looking the two boys over as he stands quietly on the other side of the ring. They're coming together. This is the 7th round. They're up. Neither boy is cut or marked as yet. They both look as if they mean business and plenty, but they don't seem to get each other quite vitally. Dempsey came into Tunney. Both of them shot both hands. Nobody did any damage, and as they came out, Tunney's right caught Dempsey lightly on the face. Then Tunney shot a hard left to Dempsey's face, which he follows up with 2 mean lefts. And as the left is in Dempsey's face, he lands a right. Then Dempsey comes back. It's down from the front line of left and right to the face. So it's going on, coming down. Dempsey is on the other side. 8-8. 9. And Tunney is up. And now they're at it again. Tunney is backing away. And Dempsey is following Tunney. Dempsey trying a long left but doesn't land. He's following Tunney all around the ring. Then Tunney lands a right and a left. And Dempsey keeps on following but can't quite get him. Tunney is now outboxing Gene a little bit. It seems that the chance has gone. Gene is still backing away. Oh, that left hook and the right. And then now Tunney drives his left and his right to Jack's face. He seems to be in pretty good condition again, but Jack is still following him. Jack hasn't shot a blow. There's Tunney's left. Slides over under Jack's face, and then he drives it. But then Jack comes in with a hard left and a hard right to Tunney's body. Then Tunney stops and shoots his right over to Jack's face. But Dempsey doesn't stop. He goes on and on after Tunney. Tunney then drives his right and left. And Jack isn't even trying to protect himself. He's trying to get in where he can hit. Tunney's right seems very light, and so did his left. Neither one bothering this Manasseh Lawler. Dempsey is still following Tunney, motioning Tunney to come in and fight. But Dempsey is standing in the middle of the ring. In his cell, with one leap, he's on Tunney, and he throws his right and left to Tunney. Face ahead 3 times, and Tunney's face looks bad. As Dempsey leans in, Tunney tries to drive the 1-2 in, but doesn't land. Then as Dempsey comes in, Tunney does land with his right to Dempsey's face. And Dempsey drives at Tunney and motions for him to come on and fight instead of backing away. Then suddenly Gene Good leaps in to the right and is somewhat dispelled now, and Dempsey is again following him around the ring. And another right and a left and a right and a left and a right, and Dempsey is almost down. And the fight is over, it's all out, and Dempsey is
By Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. It's Gene Tunney and Jack Dempsey. Gene Tunney would now become the world heavyweight champion in 1926, and he would defend his title and be the first $1 million fighter in 1927. Look out for the next video. Thanks for hanging there with me. 100 years of world championship fights. Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Salute.